laid out on the ground. And I had a little world of toy soldiers. And some kid would stick a toy truck in my face, and he would say, "Here, look at my truck." And I would say, "Can't you see my soldiers?" And he would say, "Look at my truck." And I would say, "Can't you see my soldiers?" And he would get mad at me and he would walk off. And I would feel bad about that. And I couldn't ever figure out what went wrong there. Because, you know, my grandmother would always tell me, you should go up and you should say something nice to the other person. So I knew what my grandmother's answer was. My grandmother's answer was, that little boy should have come up to you and said, "Boy, those are nice soldiers, John Elder. Can I play with them?" Nobody ever did that. And it took me until I was about 10 years old and I finally figured out that I had to give relevant responses. So when a kid said, "Look at my truck," the correct answer was, "It's a nice truck," not, "I am a soldier." I wish I could tell you how I figured that out, because boy, that was a real life-changing discovery. I mean, it sounds small or trivial or silly today, but it was really one of those things that transformed my life. Before that happened, though, the other thing that transformed my life was these friends of my parents. Because I would be a kid with other kids. I'd be a kid, and I would have these continuous failures. But then I'd come home, and my parents would have other people over at the house, and they'd take me places where there were other people. And I would say something totally weird, like, "I really like elephants." And my father's friend would say, "African elephants or Indian elephants?" And I would talk to them about ships. And my father's friend, Herb Otto, would say, "Did you know I worked on a passenger liner? And look at the Encyclopedia Britannica with me." I loved the Britannica. That was my reading material, right up until high school. They don't even have it anymore. It's kind of sad. It's all gone online. But you know, my father's friends had the mental agility to kind of draw me out and engage me. And when I think back on that time, I realize that if there's anything that you can give young people with autism in your life today, one of the greatest things you can give them is successful social interactions with grown-ups who are fast enough on their feet to respond to the weird stuff kids like me say without just saying, "You're a weirdo freak." And if you can do that with the children in your life, that's just like the greatest thing you can do for them. And if you can also, at the same time, expose the kids in your life to the widest possible range of strange stuff, because you all heard about all these autistic special interests, and I've written about them in my book, and whether it's cockroaches, or it's light switches, or it's capacitors, or it's batteries, or it's wheel bearings, you have no idea what may strike your kid's fantasy, his fantasy and his imagination, and some innocent thing could take your little boy or little girl to the top of the world. And that's what happened to me. When I was 13 years old, I was a total loser socially. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know what to do. I was failing in school. And my parents gave me a Radio Shack computer kit for Christmas. Now, back then, computer kits weren't like computers today. They were like electronic slide rules. So you had to build the thing. It had 3 transistors, some resistors, a meter, 3 potentiometers, a big case. So you had these 2 diodes with scales, and you set the numbers on them. 3 on one, 6 on the other. Then you turned the center dial until the meter read 0. And you looked down at the pointer, and if you built the thing right, it was pointing at 18, 3 times 6. Well, of course, when I turned the thing on, the meter was all the way to the right. And then I messed with it some, and it was all the way to the left. I struggled with that thing. And eventually, I was able to figure out, to see in my mind, the movement of the electricity through that computer. I was able to twist those dials, and I could see in my mind the signals rising and falling at different points in the thing. And when I could do that, I had finally mastered it. At the same time that I was learning how to master my Radio Shack computer, I was learning about music and electronics. Every kid, at least most kids, love music. I was no exception. So when you took music and you took electronics, what did you have? In my house, you had the sacrifice of every radio and television for the good of science. And there was, again, a period where things did not function after I touched them. I became a master of disassembly. People read the stuff I write, and they think, boy, you have this great gift. You could just see into these electronic circuits. And I can see into these electronic circuits. But it's not because I have this great gift and it just came to me one day and I could see into them. I got this gift because I spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours doing nothing but taking that stuff apart, putting it back together and seeing it go up in smoke and doing it again and again and again until it worked. And you know, when we look at young people today with Asperger's and autism and you think, I can't get him to do anything except that. Maybe it's video games, or maybe it's Pokemon, or it's something else. It's like that's all you can get that kid to do. That's all I did. I sat there and I messed with that electronics. And eventually I mastered it. And when I had mastered it, I was able to see sounds, and I could see them in my mind. I could imagine how electronic components would change the sound. I could put the pieces together in my mind, and when I built them in real life, they sounded like I imagined they would sound. And with that ability, I went out in the world of musicians, because I wasn't getting anywhere in the world of high school students, and I kind of made my way. Well, I had some incidents to help me on the way. I, for example, got expelled from Amherst High School, so they didn't want me back. And I had some positive career assurances that I think back on fondly. We had guidance counselors and stuff. I'm sure you guidance counselors in this school. My guidance counselors were very encouraging. They said, you know, you're going to be a high school dropout. You ain't going to be nothing. Vietnam War's over, and the Army won't even take high school dropouts anymore. So that's the kind of encouragement I got out of my father and my guidance counselor. Guidance counselor was the Army won't take me, and my father said you'd be pumping gas. So, armed with all of that, and my knowledge of electronics and my love of music, I left home. I joined a local band called FAT. And I moved in with these guys in a big old house up in Ashfield, the country. You got big old houses like that too. You got places like Muscle Shoals, Nashville and stuff. Musicians still do this kind of stuff today. Now that, I didn't know it at the time, but it was the greatest thing that I could have done. Because you know, at Amherst High School, I was nothing but a freak and a reject, and nobody wanted me, and there was no value to me, and I was good for nothing. But musicians are all freaks. And the wonderful thing about the community of musicians is they are remarkably free of all kinds of prejudice. It didn't matter if you were autistic or any kind of eccentric. It didn't matter if you were black or white or spoke strange languages. What mattered was if you could make beautiful music. That's what people wanted to see. They didn't care about any of the rest. Well, now it's like all different, because now they get MTV. You got to dress up in costumes. But when I did it, you could really be any kind of bizarre eccentric, and I surely was. And you could still make it.